Welcome to the Embodied Educator podcast, where we explore the deep connection between mind and body in education. I'm your host, Liz Wientjes, and each episode we dive into how our physical presence shapes the way we learn, teach, and grow. I'll be talking with education experts from around the world and who share their insights on embodiment in the classroom. Whether you're an educator or a lifelong learner, you'll find practical tools to explore and apply. Join me as we uncover ways to bring embodied teaching to life. Let's reshape education, one nervous system at a time. Welcome, dear educator. Thank you so much for tuning in with the Embodied Educator podcast. And it's a brand new season. I'm very excited to share new work, stories, and practices of international embodied educators with you. And there will also be some Dutch interviews, but you can go to my YouTube channel to watch those with English subtitles. So let's get back to business. Let me introduce you to my first international guest, Lisa Clughen. Am I pronouncing your surname right, Lisa?
It's Clughen, but let me tell you that nobody in Britain would pronounce it correctly either.
All right. Here she is, Lisa Clughen. Where to begin? She's an award-winning lecturer, studied languages at Oxford, is currently senior lecturer in Spanish. I would argue also very much an embodied educator. And she works at the Nottingham Institute for Languages and Intercultural Communication, NILC. Although her career has a long track record and many different positions at Nottingham Trent University, from literature study to building and running a writing and student support centre, she's also been an advocate for embodied education, hence this interview, for many, many, many years, with many publications under her name. And one must-read being Embodiment is the Future. What is embodiment? And is it the future paradigm for learning and teaching in higher education? She was also a keynote speaker at the Second International Yoga and Mind-Body Practices Conference, arguing that mind-body practices offer a simple and indeed humane response to core concerns in academia, such as physical health, mental health, well-being, the development of cognitive skills, and even employability. After connecting through our Embodiment Unlimited network, where we both studied embodiment, I got personally a taster of Lisa's passion for embodiment in education at the Conference of Embodied Education in Denmark. There, she led a workshop on embodied movement pedagogies for learning, teaching, and well-being in higher education. And this passionate busy bee is also developing a course called Somatic Movement for Educators, together with not just anybody, with Dr. Martha Eddy. And this course will be released via 1HE, an international platform for educational development in higher education. So let's meet this multi-passionate, embodied colleague and friend who has a love for cats, clouds, Qigong, and sabbaticals. She's just finished her third to publish some more amazing embodied work. So Lisa, lovely to have you here.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Liz. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm so looking forward to pick your brain on so much embodied stuff. Well, and actually, I wouldn't say pick your body, but welcome. So in our preparation call, you shared with me your story about having an eating disorder, and you came into contact with embodiment through this self-care practice you started, basically. So I'm wondering, could you share with us a bit more about what embodiment brought you or didn't maybe bring you in this time of your life?
Yes, well, as you say, unfortunately, my awareness of embodiment, including my own embodiment, was neither a healthy nor a pleasant one from a very young age, actually. And as a sufferer of an eating disorder, I was very, very aware of the problematic, painful aspects of embodied existence.
Yeah.
And from a very young age, I was involved with the Northern Initiative for Women and Eating, NIWE it was called. And there I became aware that it wasn't just me. that the body was not always experienced as a safe place, but often a site of trauma, suffering, disorder. So dissatisfaction with the body and hugely distressing relationships with what should nurture the body were the norm in the cultures I was engaging with and in my own experience.
And you shared with me a specific moment that had a pivotal turn on your embodiment, your practice, the voicing, and also your eating disorder, how you cope with that. And that was the International No Diet Day. Can you share a little bit about that day, that particular moment? Because it sounded so, I don't know, empowering.
Well, yes, exactly. Trauma can be productive as well as destructive. Yeah, that was, I read a newspaper article on that going to be this thing called International No Diet Day. And I thought, oh, right, let's do something about that. Just me, young woman. And I thought, I launched a campaign. And I rang up local councils and I rang up this Northumbria University Students' Union. I contacted everybody and I put on an International No Diet Day campaign. We reached the news in the north of England down to Yorkshire. In fact, Northumbria Students' Union put on a comedy event to support International No Diet Day. The NIWE, the Northern Initiative for Women in Eating, were wonderful. They supported me. And at Gray's Monument in Newcastle, which is in Northern England in the UK, we had a stall and I invited people to chop up tape measures and to wear them as badges. And it was really popular, really successful, yeah. And so that was sort of helped me to realize, was a way in which I was saying to myself, really, that I'm going to do something about this, that it is possible to engage with really traumatic aspects of embodiment, such as in disordered eating.
Yeah, it's deeply housed, double-sided in the body, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds also to me like embodied activism, but truly coming from your disorder coming out, and then the pain combined with a certain passion that I also feel when you went on that day and put measure tapes around people. Yeah.
No, I didn't put them around people. No. You put them up.
You cut them up, yeah. Tie it up
and in them and wear them. Cut up tape measures. We didn't need to be controlled with the tape.
Of course, yeah. And then, isn't it correct that this is also the time of your professional career in university, because that was actually your personal lead into, I guess, the embodiment world, first of all, as a wounded healer. That in your university, in your educational, you started also your postgraduate writing on eating disorders and starting to bring the body in, isn't it?
I did. It was by chance, really. I didn't set out to do it.
No.
Spanish lecturer. I did an MA in cultural studies, and it was there that I encountered feminist writings on the body. And these writers helped me to frame historically what I was experiencing as an individual. And I then took my MA to Newcastle University, to the Department of Hispanism, and I started to look at the body in the works of the great Spanish writer, poet and dramatist Federico García Lorca, and looked at how Lorca was exploring really destructive cultural representations of the body, the sort of destruction and disdain for the body I'd been reading and hearing about in feminist writing on the body. And I could see Lorca exploring them and sort of the end points of annihilation when one follows the destructive cultural discourses around the body.
What kind of cultural discourses did you encounter?
So two writers on the body and on that were relevant to sufferers of eating disorders were the feminist philosopher Susan Bordeaux, and also the psychotherapist and psychoanalyst Susie Orbach. Susie Orbach was very famous in the UK for her book Fact as a Feminist Issue, but she was also very famous because she was Princess Diana's psychotherapist. Was very well known. I had the pleasure of hearing her speak in Newcastle actually when I was much younger. And they were very, very clear that about the cultural heritage of dualism that had led to, that had encouraged, set the stage for destructive responses and framings of the body and embodiment. And so I'll just talk maybe about Bordeaux, who looked at images of the body that pertain through culture, really from Greco-Roman culture right through. And she would say there are images that persisted, that were standard images that you'd see about the body. And she identified 4 real key images. And the first one was how the body was represented as alien to the self, an object, something that wasn't me. I think she said that Plato described it as the body is nailed to me or something like that. But yeah, the body was alien, something that could then be worked upon if it was an object or something else. And another dominant image was that the body was represented as a source of confinement. You often images of the cage, of the prison, of the fog, that it was confining the real self, which was often represented as the rational self. I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
And of course, if the body is that which limits us, which confines us, which doesn't work for us, it gets in the way of the body. When you're ill, it doesn't work for you, does it?
Well, you need to produce 9 to 5, right? It needs to wake up, do its thing, and bring you from A to B. Yeah, of course.
But, if you're trying to think rationally and you're ill, you're not going to think rationally. So it does get in the way according to these discourses and dominant representations of the body. So if it is that which works against us, which confines and limits us, then the body is enemy. And that was the third image that Bordeaux really was developed and discussed, that the body is our enemy, gets in the way of our rational thought, our transcendent mind. And if it's our enemy, what do you do with an enemy? You go to war with it. You battle against the body, as sufferers of eating disorders often are.
Yeah.
As I certainly was.
Yeah.
And this sort of enemy body, this body which was the source of confusion, of confinement, it just got in the way of me being me. Was a threat to the self. It was getting in the way of me being me. And so what do you do when something threatens you? You defeat it, you chastise it, you and as often seen in literature and as actually seen in the texts of Lorca, who I was studying, you kill it off. Death is a result of war. And Bordeaux was really clear that the cultures were at war with the body. Very interesting writing. And it really spoke to me as a sufferer of eating disorders. I felt at war with my body. I was suddenly aware that, oh my goodness, this isn't just an individual disorder. This is something which dualistic discourses around the body are setting up, encouraging, promoting.
Feeding it.
Feeding it, yes, exactly.
To stay in the words of, yeah.
Absolutely. And Susie Orbach said that one of the West's greatest imports was hatred for the body. Yeah. So they historicized relationships with the body, and that was really empowering, because if it's something which is historically produced, you can change those responses. And that's what I tried to do for the rest of my career after this initial writing and this initial exploration and investigation.
It starts like such a dark side to start off working on embodiment, and so deep and profound, but also so dark and kind of it gives me the idea of also maybe loneliness and such tough road you have traveled from going from such an eating disorder and then feeling like an alien with the body, you know, not belonging and such a holder of pain.
And it wasn't pleasant to be in my body. And
No.
yeah, it was a painful road. And at the end of my MPhil dissertation, I actually said, you know, I'd wound through misogyny. I'd looked at images of women in culture as vampires, you know, women who were too devouring, too excessive, wanted too much, consumed everything in their midst. It was a very painful thing to do, but it was also very, very helpful.
It sounds like the feminine, like the feminism rise up brought you some ground and support in a way, even though it was dark.
It allowed me to see that it was socially and culturally produced, this body. It was a historical body. And that means if these are images that persisted throughout culture, then you could create other images in the body and think about ways, but not just think about the body. This is embodiment. Experience the body, be the body in different ways. And at the end of my MPhil, I said, I have really stayed with the unsavory aspects of embodiment. I had to stay with the pain. We shouldn't avoid pain. Pain is part of being human. And my dissertation was really sitting with painful aspects of embodiment, and my writings post my dissertation. But at the time I was writing, post-structuralist analyses of Lorca were really prevalent, and they were celebrating the diversity and the slippages of embodiment. And I thought it was too soon to celebrate. But after I'd stuck with my pain, I thought for the rest of my career, I'm going to celebrate this body and see what it offers to life. And that's what I've done in education. I think the body, I agree with John Dewey, you know, the body is, how did he phrase it? The most remarkable structure, did he call it? Or the remarkable thing in the universe. And I agree with that. And for the rest of my career life, I've sought out the really ways of celebrating the body, ways of seeing what it has to offer me in my life and my students in their education.
Yeah. Before we jump into education, I'd love to ask you just, what does being a body mean to you now? Because that's often what we say, right? Embodiment is being a body. And how does that, what does that mean for you now?
Well, I remember Chris Schilling, the UK sociologist, came up with a really interesting term for approaches to the body in sociology. And he described it as an absent presence. And I think that when I was younger and really suffering from eating disorder, I had numbed myself to my body. As Bordeaux says, people with eating disorders often express a numbness, overcoming a transcendence of the body. And the body was really absent, I think, for me too. I had overcome it. I tried to anyway, because it's always present. It is never going to go away. The body is our life. It's where we experience, where we live our lives.
We are born with it and we die with it, right? It's our only home throughout life.
It's not going to go away. Yeah. And so I think where I try to overcome, as in Bordeaux's images and metaphors of the body, where I try to overcome this enemy, I now realise it's not going to go away. It is me. It's where I live my life. So I may as well appreciate it. And with the other critics of Lorca who were celebrating the body, I try to be kind now. I try to say, well, how can my body be a productive part of my life, a supportive part of my life? How can I be kind to this body? And so I've evolved, an about turn in my relationship with the body, really. That is also thanks to the feminist writing on the body. challenging negative representations of the body, negative ways of speaking about the body, and living in the body. It was really feminists who made me aware of different ontologies. There was another way of being in relationship to my body, and thanks to the Northern Initiative of Women in Eating, thanks to feminist writing, that was my journey for after my initial writings. My postgrad writings on the body was like, well, how can I be a body in a different way? And a more nurturing than I had been.
Yeah, it sounds like this raw, intense, yet also vulnerable and nourishing wave you've been on that fed you throughout your educational career. So let's dive a little bit into the where you brought it yourself into education. And well, one of the things I came to know you better is you love sabbaticals. And you're very productive in those, I must say. And I believe you were seconded from your other job at the university to set up an academic support service. And part of that was to help students with their academic needs in university-wide, so different programs where the students came from. And then students who were writing their paper or dissertation or any other big writing assignment in the university could come to you for help when they get stuck in their writing. And you phrased it in our previous call as you met the needs of the students and their bodies. And that sounded like where it really became this embodied educational level of work. I love this. What did the students come to you with? How could you help them?
The first thing I would say is I'm not sure I met their needs, but I certainly encouraged them that it was possible for them to meet their needs. But what did they come to me with? Well, again, discourses, ways of talking about an entity were really prevalent with regards to writing at the time I set up my academic support service. And students would just buy into ways of talking about writing that were very prominent. In other words, they come to me saying they needed help with the skill of writing, with their skills. And that was a dominant way of thinking about writing at the time. The academics called it the autonomous approach to writing, as if writing was an autonomous, independent thing, had no context to it, it had no history to it. And if I taught the technical skills, say, of sentence construction, then writing could be produced. Paragraph structure, writing could be produced. And the students would say, you need to help me write a sentence or with my sentence construction. And they just come and really recite this discourse of skills. They needed help with skills. And it was so clear to me that writing is so much more than a skill. I'm not against skills teaching. I will happily discuss sentence construction until the cows come home, actually. But it was so clear to me, and it was very clearly phrased in one of the students' emails to me. And I've written about this in an article I wrote on embodied writing support. Oh no, that was using psychotherapy for writing support. And a student wrote to me and she said, Lisa, I've read all of the books. I've read all the skills books. And she knew her skills. She could recite them. She says, but I just can't do it. I can't do it. And I feel I need to be spoon-fed. How about that for an embodied metaphor, encouraged by a skills approach to writing? There's that discourse. I need spoon-fed. She was asking me to tell her what to write, how to write it. She felt so disempowered. And this is it. Brian Street, one of the leading academics on writing development at the time, said we need to look at the hidden aspects of writing. And isn't it bizarre? But my argument was the body it's so visible, so material, and yet it was a hidden aspect of writing development and writing support at the time. People weren't talking really. So some people were talking about the body. The great Peter Elbow was arguing that writing development was a plot against the human voice, the human body, a plot against the body. So people were talking about it, but it wasn't at the forefront of supporting writing. So I made it.
Embodied writing is like kind of what came forth, or from embodied writing, like the
yes,
introducing the body into writing with the course you taught, or the way you helped your students
embody their writing.
Yes.
So instead of just teaching sentence construction, which I did teach,
yeah,
I was, asking the students to bring themselves to their writing, because there's this thing called parrot writing. This was a concept in writing development, parrot writing,
like
where
the bird.
Students would just mimic the writing of academics,
yes.
Not necessarily understanding it,
no,
not necessarily relating to it in any way, and you could see this in their writing. So I wanted to help them bring their bodies to their writing, relate to what they were saying, be excited by what they were saying, tell me about the relevance to life of what they were saying. And just by changing that perspective from skills support to who are you and what are you wanting to do with your writing? Oh my goodness, the students would come into their own, And so, Sally Mitchell, a really great writer at the time, she would say, instead of asking, how can I fix students' writing skills approach, I would wonder who you are. And that seems to me a really embodied approach to writing. Who are these writers sitting in front of me, and why does their writing matter to them? And then, of course, we don't exist in a vacuum. How might it relate to me? Why might it matter to me? And in our conversations, that's what we would explore. So they could our student writers could feel like they were producing something they wanted to produce that mattered to them and mattered to the world.
Oh, wow. It's like turning totally from this perfection producing concept of, in study, you need to do this, do that, and get the approvals. It turns back to this allowance of, I'm also a student, a human being with thoughts and feelings and a perception of the world. And I'm actually listened to, first of all, before I have to get that grade or get the bar. And that sounds to me, when you spoke about it, I was like, I could lean in and rest back. So in that sense, I already felt the embodied level of writing, because I do encounter that, because I guide a lot of students in their applied sciences context final thesis. And I encounter the same problem. I can't do it. I don't know what to write. What do you want me to say? What do you want me to read? Can you just dictate the sentence for me? And the spoon fed, oh my goodness, I think it's a bigger problem around the world. So this embodied approach, except from the students, what I hear you say is that they felt that they were listened to, they felt that they were seen, they felt that they matter. What was your tools working with them on a very practical embodied level to give the listeners a little bit more of an impression of what do we work with when we work embodied with our students?
I did a lot of reading on how sort of well-known writers produce their writing. And this was just one little thing I developed, but well-known writers would often say that they needed to get away from rational thinking for writing, which I loved as a feminist. So in other words, they were saying, I needed to engage with my body.
You're already
whether it was recognizing that your body needed to rest and get away from writing, or just put yourself in a state of relaxation for writing. And one of the writers that gave a beautiful image that I then brought in to respond to your question into my writing support sessions was David Armand, who also comes from Newcastle. He's a famous children's writer in the UK. And he said that in his writing process, part of it was writing from the side of his eye. In other words, he was giving up this
peripheral view
thinking process. I have to think, I have to produce my writing, I have to have this structure, and just letting ideas tumble in. And so I thought that was, writing from the side of my eye. I thought that was a really, so you've got your eyes involved, you've got the notion of space coming into the writing support session. And I was doing this quite naturally, actually, because the students would come in with their essay and they're like, Lisa, you would have tears, you would have panic, you'd have confidence. Lisa, I need you to help with my writing. So I would get this object of power, this source of distress, and allow us to write from the side of our eye. And I'd physically move the writing aside for the time being, move our bodies to another, like really literally, move, that's it. Can we put the writing aside for a minute and can you explain to me, because I know nothing about this, because don't forget, I was dealing with writing from across the disciplines, and that's it. I know nothing about it. Can you just chat to me, tell me the idiot's guide, please, to what you want to say, and just tell me one interesting thing about what you want to say. So that source of power, that source of distress in some circumstances was moved aside. We took our bodies to a different part of the room, and then we could have that human interaction, that embodied interaction. And by embodied interaction, I mean, I could really express what it was that excited me or confused me by what the students were saying. I could engage with them by what they were wanting to say, not about the words that were often being parroted in their writing. But tell me one thing, explain this title to me, will you? As soon as they start explaining the title in their words, they've written their introduction to their essay, more or less. But it was through that lovely interaction where I could express my own embodied, excitement or confusion or pleasure, or relate my lived experience. Oh, that reminds me of. Is that right?
Yeah. It sounds almost like the relating and you being a compass, or you follow from what you can give back from what you hear, how it echoes in you and what it brings you. So to play.
And not fearing the emotions in that that interaction of excitement and pleasure. And I love that. How often are you really told by someone, I love that, I love what you're saying there, tell me more about that? How often do you hear people saying that to you? And they know that if someone's saying, oh, that's fascinating, they're onto something. Yeah. And so bringing the emotions, allowing for the emotions to naturally take their place in the writing support session was really important, I think.
And while you're talking, because I also read a lot of theses, and I'm now putting this into context, thinking when I read the report, it's also dry, and I also tend to get as a grader in the what's wrong mentality very easily, where I really have to put myself on a hand on my heart sometimes and think, okay, but this is a human being and spent many hours on this. Let's come from love. What would love say? What would love do? And then, so that I'm resonating with that. But then I actually noticed that when they come to defend their writing, then the passion comes in. It's very hard to download that to the writing. How do you help guide them in that process? Because I don't know, maybe it's us being embodied, but it's so easy for me as well in the body, and then get it into the writing.
Oh, right. Well, I don't know if you've ever encountered the work of Peter Elbow. He's a very, very famous voice. He was described as somebody who had more, US educator, and has been described as somebody who's had more impact on writing development than anybody else in the world. So he's marvelous, and he promoted free writing, so you might have encountered Peter Elbow. Well, I was fortunate enough one, to go on a writer's retreat with Peter Elbow, but two, to hear him speak at a conference in Glasgow. And he started his keynote paper, and this is a technique I've developed since. And he said, most people, and this is the autonomous approach to writing, most people want to situate writing on the page, skills, sentence construction. But I want to situate writing in the mouth. And that's how he started. Now, for me, the mouth is too limited a place. That's the seat of liberal humanist rationality anyway. I want to situate writing in the body. Why do you feel that's important? You know, but this notion of situating writing in the mouth was a marvelous opening, I thought.
It engages the body already. I mean,
it does.
And like and it also brings up this lightness and quickness and response.
And we can laugh with our mouths.
Yes.
We can bite our pens with our mouths. So it's Peter Elbow opening up with of supporting writing beyond the skills approach was really important for me. And this is one thing I would do then, as you've said, how do you get all these wonderful ideas onto the page? I'd use what's called talk-write methodologies. I really loved that notion of situating writing in the mouth. And so when I'd say to the student, well, why is that important? Why? Then they'd explain. And I'd say, write that down. Or I would write it. They were speaking their words, not my words, their words, and say, is this what you said? Or would have a chat, and then I'd say, do you want to quickly write down what you've just said? And so talk-write was really quite a common methodology I would use in my writing support sessions, because you know, it helped the students to embody what they wanted to say and then get it down on the page.
It's actually, now you're talking about it, it's a method I encounter a lot because I follow a lot of embodied courses, and they often suggest when it comes to reflection or to first talk out loud and then record it so you can capture yourself and then listen back and then take the notes from there. So it's actually such a simple advice I'm thinking now to also do with your students, because we have those devices to record yourself all the time, to speak out loud. And actually do a practice now for a whole week to give myself appreciation every night before I go to bed, and then I sit on my bed and I hold myself and I have to say it out loud, and I notice the first round I'm just thinking them and I need to do it again because it's so confrontational, so impactful. I didn't notice this talk and write, like the talking is such an embodied revelation of what comes up and comes out, but you need to be fast to capture it. You need to be so fast.
And also I think to extend beyond just talking is also to be aware of writing from the side of one's eye, to bring that
the gaze
aspects of writing. So not if you're talking with your lecturer, that mightn't always produce the wonders of what our students can say. Put yourself in a really, well, this is important. We're just having a chat about my writing, which is what the situation I try to set up. When we're not really doing my writing, I'm just having a chat about it. That can just take the pressure off. I don't have to say anything clever. I don't have to say anything, first class, the focus on the first class marks. I just have to have a chat. So bringing writing from the side, the eye into the talk write, I think is really important to take that pressure off, to see what unfolds in a very relaxed chat about writing.
To not add up to the I'm not good enough. Because
if you think I don't have to write anything clever and good, it doesn't matter, does it?
No.
So
it's beautiful. Also magic can come out
Oh yeah.
when you meet the needs for the students and their bodies. Yeah. Yeah.
It really can. I mean, you'd see students when you'd saying, "Oh, let's have a chat about your writing." You'd see them physically change in front of you. You know, as we had a laugh, and I'm like, "Oh, this reminds me of this." Allowing our passions about writing and ideas to come out. You'd see their bodies change, and best job in the world. You know, listening to their ideas, I learned so much from them. It really was having a chat about a great way of
what's a specific tip you could give educators so they can, because I mean you've had quite your journey, and you're so in love with the languages in the background, and all the authors that come through our chat are just amazing. What one or two tips could you give educators from this perspective about embodied writing, to just be very specific for the ones who are a little bit in doubt, or, you know, shy maybe to practice this with their students?
Well, this is something I would say about not just for writing, but for education in general. And you mentioned my article at the beginning of our chat on embodiment as the future.
Yeah.
And I think, let's put it simply, if you want to promote embodied education, if you want to bring the body into writing, just ask the simple question: how have I responded to the body in this? It's very simple. And so, but that has that can produce a lot of discussion, can't it? You know. So that could be how the body needs to feel safe. Have I done something in our writing support or in education to help that body to feel safe in this space, to feel safe to express their ideas to me, to feel safe to say I haven't got a clue what I'm writing about, to feel safe to say I need to be spoon-fed. So have I responded to the body in this? How have I responded to the body in this?
Beautiful starting question.
And the answer is unending, really.
Yeah. But that's beautiful, isn't it? With embodiment, it's not like one method, one tool you do. It's a way of life, and it only grows more on you and deeper once you continue, right? It's
well, the body's always changing.
It's
alive. It never stops changing, and it feels different in one context, goes to a different lecture, and can feel totally different again. So it's always alive, and sometimes you can need rest, and you know, sometimes in the writing support session it's not appropriate really to go for it and get all excited about the writing. Sometimes you know, you might just say the student just maybe tired, and so you might just say, sure, let's discuss one nice thing that you've written here then. And dial it down. Or if they're full of energy, you can dial it up. You know, it's how have I recognized and embraced, let's use the word embraced, the body in this.
I'm thinking we set up a little bit of a structure for the questions that you said dial up and dial down. I feel like we could use maybe a little embodiment now before we do two more questions. Would that be okay to do a little bit of your Qigong, because that's one of your practices, right? Where you what you practice alongside the educational work, but you're actually also bringing it into the classroom, I believe, because you also wrote about Qigong practices in education. Am I correct?
You are absolutely correct. I didn't start off doing Qigong to bring them into my educational practice. I started off Qigong with the Qigong Grandmaster Brian Simpson and a mindfulness expert Shama Shaladina, and I started doing Qigong with them on a Sunday for me, because it was during COVID. We all remember, I think it's well recognized how stressful COVID was.
That was disembodied and embodiment at its best, right?
Yeah, wasn't it? And so I
Wow.
needed to, and I was really aware I was just trying to grapple with online classes. I was sitting down all the time, the stress of it all. I knew I needed to move because I'd done enough research to know that not moving has a terrible impact on your mental health and well-being. So I started Qigong classes, and oh my goodness, what they did for me was quite incredible. That I thought, oh, I wonder if my students would go for this. So I brought just one move. It started a bit bigger, but I dialed it down to one move per session into my classes. And would you like to do one of the movements I did with my students? One or two?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
love to. I think it's always nice to have a tiny practice in there. I'm shifting my tiny stage a little bit backwards because I think we're doing it standing, right? If we can.
Well, what I would say with as you know, Liz, with any embodiment practice,
Yes. Yeah.
there's no
Right or wrong.
you do what is right for your body.
Yes.
Well, however what I love about Qigong is it's very inclusive. You can do Qigong standing, sitting down, lying down, or, and I'd also say, what do you need? What does your body need? If you don't want to move, actually watching something can have an impact on your body. I mean, athletes use that and dancers use that. It's called idiokinesis, where you just visualize a movement taking place.
Yeah.
So I'm going to not giving you instructions as to what to do, but just encourage just even a moment now, and anybody who wants to do this with me, just to be with your body for a second or so and think, what do I need? I will stand up. But what do you need?
I also definitely need a little bit of movement to surrender to the sitting again because I'm a little hot. So I need a little standing activation. Yeah.
But I would encourage whatever is right. That's how you do.
Yeah.
That's how you movement.
Take care of yourselves.
So, so this movement that I learned, I studied with the Qigong Grandmaster. I wouldn't call myself a Qigong teacher, but I did study with Brian Simpson, so I could bring it to my students. So I am trained to bring this into education. And what I love about Qigong is that you can use any movement, you can guide it for different purposes. And this movement that I thought I would do with you is the first movement from a set called Shibashi, Tai Chi, Qigong, Shibashi, set 1, and it's movement 1. And it's it's the first movement. So in the first movement, it's about just coming into our space. So you can see the relevance to education already. Coming into our space. So our students might have arrived at my Spanish classes from another session, or they might have missed the please move, that's great. They might have missed their bus, they might be flustered. So the movements we do in Qigong can be used to guide us into presence, into focus. And that's how I'm going to guide this movement. I could guide it in different ways, but we'll try and bring ourselves into focus. Nice. And I'm noticing you're shaking a bit. Let's continue doing that. Sort of just preparing our bodies, because sometimes we can have arrive with a lot of energy, and shaking can be the best thing to do to deal with that energy, stress. So just gentle shaking, anything that's right for you. Let me know when you're done.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay. So our bodies can really help with what we need in education. Is real awareness I've developed through my relationship with Qigong. And even the beginning of a Qigong session, where we step into our session, you don't just start doing the movement. Even that beginning of stepping into which we are going to do in a minute, stepping into the Qigong session is so helpful. And I actually use it when I arrive home from work, to step away from work and the busyness of the day and into my evening. I use this movement quite a lot, actually. So I'm just going to invite you to set our bodies up, actually, and feel your feet on the floor. Just become aware of your feet's engagement with the floor below you, holding you. Just take a breath in as you go through your body, seeing perhaps where you hold tension, noticing in that respect your shoulders, your face. Take a breath in and out. And another breath in your time, a nice breath. Any tension? Let it go. And with your left leg, I'm going to invite you to step in to our practice, not too far, feet shoulder width apart, and you've stepped into this moment, into your Spanish lesson, and just away from the busyness of the day. And you can just push yourself away from the day if you would like, if that helps. And I'm going to invite you to move with your body, so don't feel you have to copy me. I'll demonstrate the movement first, but just see what's right for you. And it's a very simple movement. You have your knees bent, nice soft knees, and you slightly tuck your bottom in, because then that makes your spine more erect, more poised, shall we say. And it's like what the teachers often say, is it's like having a golden thread going through your back, up into the air. That thread's got you. You can be relaxed. And all you do, so with loose knees, is you gently bring your arms up to shoulder height and then back down. Up as you breathe in, and then breathing out as you go down. Engaging with your breath. So you're here, like a conductor. You can play with movement. Your arms are like perhaps a conductor of an orchestra, bringing you into this moment, into the Spanish class, with me and your peers. Can you make this movement a bit lighter, perhaps? Bring some lightness into your body. My own teacher often says, imagine there are balloons attached to your wrists, and notice whether that has an impact on how you're moving. And then we're going to emphasize that you're conducting yourself into this space, and you might even say a mantra. And as my background is literature, I'm going to bring in the words of T.S. Eliot from Little Gidding. Here, now, always. Here, here in Spanish. One more. Now, always. Just spend a moment noticing your here-ness. When it's right, when the time's right for you, just bring your feet together, and we'll end in a Qigong style. One hand out, and the fist, a loose fist, because we're not going to fight each other, but there's still strength there. And bow to each other for sharing this space and this moment together.
I love the ritual in the practice, Lisa, of the stepping in, acknowledging the space first of all, and not just rushing into an exercise.
Yes.
Like, let's do this, but it makes you so aware of the fact that, oh, we tend to have, you know, a reason, and then from that, other things are allowed to come forward.
That's a really lovely observation. So it sort of, it brings you into presence, just that little moment. It allows you to get your stuff together to center into this moment. Yeah, I love it too. And I find, I know this isn't part of Qigong. This is why I wouldn't say I'm a Qigong teacher, but I'm a mindful teacher because I develop it. But I love that pushing away of the day as well. Here, I mean, the body does this quite naturally, I think. You know, if you're stressed, you go, come on. It's quite an instinct.
Yeah.
And they've brought that into this beautiful set of, and I'm not even sure I would have guided it in that way with my students. You can guide it in all sorts of different ways for resilience, for everything.
Yeah, and the words you chose also in my own language, because it's always most profound. Do you notice my voice just went a tone down? I'm like, oh, my voice is different. I like it. Here, now, always. In Dutch, I sometimes go sing mantras in the church, that just ordinary mantras, so not religious, but the place and the location and the light. And we have this song where it's like, here am I. And it's just, and that's what brought it back to me, that just to be in the now, the here. And actually, that's such a wonderful thing to do and to practice, because we tend to be somewhere else in the future, in the past. It's so easy. So I wonder, how do your students respond to this? What do you encounter introducing working with the body in this way?
Well, I was really nervous about bringing this into my sessions. I will hasten to add that I brought this into online sessions. I think that's really important, because the students could turn their cameras off and in the main, so they didn't feel as exposed. And I think the onlineness was really important. I was really nervous. Other writers who emphasize physicality in the classroom also talk about this nervousness, such as Susan Rack, who wrote this wonderful book on embodied teaching, effectively teaching and learning. And even Susan Rack, who's an expert in movement in the classroom, in embodied approaches to the classroom, talks about, and I quote, a nervousness when asking the students to do anything physical. We're not used to doing physical things in the classroom, and certainly not something really out of the ordinary like Qigong. So I was nervous, but actually this is such a nice way of getting over the nerves. But I knew the impact Qigong had on me and my own sort of stress levels during the pandemic. So I gave them the option not to do it. That's really important. And set them work if they didn't want to engage in this practice. I did it at the start of the class, so it didn't take up too much class time. So I think setting the stage up is really important if you're going to bring something like Qigong into the classroom. And they responded so positively that I did that for a mini sabbatical, because I thought, oh, they won't do it. I didn't think they would do it with me. And I had a colleague from psychology, an independent researcher, Dr. Amanda Edmondson. She did some focus groups with the students, so to guard against, acquiescence in the research. And they were saying remarkable things about how it just helped them to calm. It would be good before exams, and they enjoyed it. They thought it was weird how did they respond? They did say that when Lisa first suggested we were going to do this, we thought, what's this? I had to have a look into it. It's a bit weird, a bit odd. But the ones who did it and went for it, and then I had another research method where they gave some feedback just after the movements, a survey feedback. And there's some really sort of poignant comments coming up. So I would use the one I've just done with you for focus, for coming into the now.
Yeah.
What I remember very clearly, one of the students saying that his sister had something really terrible going on at that moment, and he just couldn't get he couldn't stop thinking about his sister. So he wasn't in Spanish, he wasn't in the here and now with me, he was with his sister. And the comments from this student on doing the movements, he said, I felt I was coming, I was in Spanish, I was allowed to let it go, I was allowed to just allow myself to be where I was. And quite remarkable. Even I was surprised at what the students were saying, but I think what the comments sort of say from that student persuaded me to go on with the research and to go on with bringing this odd, unusual practice into higher education. Yeah. Because they really clearly spoke of students not leaving their bodies at the door, but coming in with their histories, their embodied selves. That student in particular was quite clearly saying, you know, my life doesn't stop when I enter the classroom. So Qigong is a way, or a movement in general, actually, any movement, is a way of getting them to be in the moment, and that is embodiment. You know, you're much more in that moment if you're in connection with your body than your mind that can take you backwards, forwards in time, all over the place. Your body is that location in the moment.
Yeah. Embodied awareness is in the present moment, and the conscious awareness is either in the past or in the future.
Right.
Yeah. Like Amanda Blake talks about, in a book. Ah, wow. That's such a wonderful comment from their student, that he could leave his sister out for a moment and be there with you. And I think that's also, it sounds like they can become more, I don't know if responsible is the word, but so you're giving them tools to decide or to become aware of the fact that, how am I entering when I cross the threshold of the door to come into the room and think, oh, where am I? What I would like to engage here. So what is it that I need to have that conversation with them and to meet that?
And of course, the elongation of the breath that comes through moving the arms down.
Yeah.
Will allow the students to meet that quite difficult space in relaxation.
Yeah, of course. It's like the focus on the vagus nerve and the ventral vagal state that's activated. Exactly. To get them a little bit more in the relaxed, the chill zone, one of my colleagues calls it, of their nervous system.
Which is what the brain needs to you don't learn in practice.
Yeah. I'm peeking at my notes because we've gone through quite some journeys of you in your education. You're also very much housed in the modern languages teaching.
Yeah.
And I know in maybe another sabbatical, I don't know how much forward in time, you've been working a lot with embodiment skills and specifically with the handwriting landing in your lessons. And could you give an example how you work with that, and how does that engage your teaching? And what
so I've always been a modern languages lecturer, but I just did secondments to do other things in the meantime. And I think modern languages pedagogies are very embodied. We use a lot of movement, a lot of music, very embodied pedagogy, a lot of play. And I don't know how you learned languages, Liz, but when I was studying it, vocabulary learning, for example, was really quite painful. Look at that for embodiment. just used to write lists and lists of long words and try and repeat them, which is good. It helps the memory, but it was painful. It wasn't enjoyable. And embodied, the body feels, that's embodied learning. It feels, if we can learn enjoy, the brain's going to thank you for it. The body's going to thank you for it.
Definitely.
The rest of the class is going to thank you for it.
Yeah.
So one of the things I do, there's lots of embodied methodologies and languages, but one thing, it's a quick and simple thing I've done a lot to help with this quite painful process of vocabulary learning, was use handwriting and use the hands. So the first thing I would do is say, any new theme, there's a whole raft of new words and phrases to use. So I just invite the students to write out, say we're in the restaurant, we're doing the topic of the restaurant, and the students, I'd invite the students to say 5 things that you think you would need if you were in Spain ordering in a restaurant. So five phrases or foodstuffs that really matter to you, that you would use. That's embodiment in itself. Things that matter to the students. Invite them to write them out. So they've got their 5 phrases, whether it's could I have, me pone, they need that, or what they're going to eat. So they write it out. So they start writing in the first place. And then have a little bit of fun. I invite them to practice these phrases with a guessing game. So they take one of their phrases and they either, and choice is very important.
Yeah.
They either write it, say naranja, orange, on the back, whatever phrase they're practicing, on the back of somebody, on their hand, or on the desk in front of them. Not really writing on the desk, you understand, yeah. But on the desk. Now it's important to give that choice because not everybody likes to be touched, and that's really important. So you give them the three options, or they could, sometimes I said you could do your Spanish flamenco hands and write in the air. Sometimes they like that option, and yeah, there you go.
I'm with you. Estoy contigo.
Muy bien, me alegro. And they're just practicing, and then you've got to guess, oh, what's she writing on? What are they writing on my bag? Or simple way of making that vocabulary learning a bit more fun,
yeah,
but crucially embodied. So I've done that approach for years. You know, they all like, like it. They really do like it. Yeah. It's better than sitting trying to memorize vocabulary learning, and they're playing a guessing game. It's like, oh, you can see their brains working. Is that naranja? Is that an N? Is that an N? You can get them practice their alphabet as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And then it really goes well. It doesn't have to be for long. You know, they can just ask each other two of their phrases, and they're learning the words from somebody else too. So it's bringing that connection. The body is bringing connection into the classroom.
Yeah.
And what I know now is that is a deeply embodied practice for 2 reasons. Well, for lots of reasons, actually, 3 reasons. One is because it uses the handwriting.
Yeah.
And there's some really, really interesting research, say from Van der Wiel and Van der Meer.
Van der Wiel and Van der Meer. Echte Nederlanders.
They've recently produced a very interesting paper on handwriting, saying that if you write by hand, as opposed to just pressing a key on a keyboard, the connectivity between the parietal and the central brain regions is greatly enhanced. Your brain's working really hard to think, right, have I actually produced that L, or is that an N? Really, so your brain becomes alive just through handwriting itself.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of scientists writing on the importance of handwriting as opposed to typing on the brain. Now, in terms, if you don't want to use handwriting because of matters of inclusivity, so sometimes it's much better to use the keyboard. You can do movement, you can do other things which are going to stimulate the brain. But the handwriting experts are persuading me that I need to sort of bring handwriting uses of the hand into my classroom as a matter of course, rather than just because it's pleasurable. But that's the other way in which it's embodied, you know, pleasure puts the brain at rest, so it's much more responsive to learning. But the other thing of that is for the students who do choose to have a word written on their back,
the touch.
And touch, again, you can look at the learning scientists who will say how touch signals security, you know, safety, bonding, and it calms. Touch calms. So that little activity, the use of the hands, it has all sorts of ramifications in terms of embodiment. And at the end of the day, it's good fun. And that is what we want in the classroom.
I love it. To bring in the pleasure, like the fun element as well, to just have some playfulness, because that activates, again, you know, the other part of the brain that we don't use so often, that gets in a totally different physiological state. And then the part where you address touch with the element of choice. So you always make them, you know, in a safe context, be aware of what is it that I need, and I'm always allowed to say no without a consequence, which is also something I really love. So you can't force it, and then just play with the way that they can go about to make it different, like writing in the air or on the table. So it's still,
and they obviously make it different. Sometimes make it different themselves. You know, students will take on an idea and
they'll probably make it their own.
You might see them writing in the air, or, you know.
So cool. You also mentioned in bringing in the body, and I think we've touched upon this a little bit before, but you might encounter some form of resistance in introducing and learning with the body. And I think we've already talked about this element of choice, but and in inclusiveness. How can we work with that awareness as embodied educators? What is it that we need to bring in order to work with embodiment in a safe enough way? I mean, everybody has their own triggers and responses, but how can you work with that?
Well, as I've said, Susan Ragg, other people say, you know, ask them to move, ask them to do something physical. It's not the norm. It's a cultural other, to speak in a humanities way. The body has been written out of education in many ways. And so it's not the norm to have fully embodied educational systems. And so it can seem like, why are you telling us to do this? So choice is important. If they really don't want to do it, really don't do it. So you've got to contextualize, I think, any embodied activity you do, so it's appropriate for the learners, and let the learners decide that themselves. Now, I always think given choice, so I give you three options there, didn't I? But there's always the option not to do that activity and just to learn the words, and that when we're doing vocabulary learning, as you do it. So choice is important. But the other thing I think really helps is discussing with your students why you're doing something, and with colleagues as well. In fact, I've just done a really lovely workshop, really exciting workshop on embodied learning, and we were talking about the wonders of coordinated rhythmic movement, moving together at the same time as somebody else, and how the scientists are saying that this can have all sorts of benefits for bringing people together. I mean, there's a lovely paper saying moving together brings us together.
Oh, yeah.
And it's lots of reasons why, mirror neurons, etc. But rather than just launch into, we're going to do this, what I often do with the students or my colleagues is present the learning signs to them. Why would we use the hands? Why? Give a rationale, give an evidence, make your teaching evidence informed. And people are more likely to go with you and think, oh, my connectivity in my brain, oh, moving, go on then, I'll move, Lisa, if it's this good for you. So I think allow people to make their decisions on whether to partake in embodied activities in an informed way. Why do I think it's good to move in the classroom? Why do I think that Qigong might help in the classroom? Present some of I'm not a few quotations, you know, I'm saying go and do the whole session on why movement is good in the classroom, but at least allow them to say that, you know, researchers are recommending it to you. So I think that I think that's also the key. So choice and evidence for your practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think your papers are really helpful for the teachers to find that evidence, to have all sorts of links, right? Because sometimes I imagine our teachers, and maybe that's also why this podcast is there, to really help them reach out for the evidence in so different fields. And I love your papers because they really are full of such also practical links and stuff and proof that you've gathered in all your writing time and all the papers and spectacles and whatnot. So I think you have such a wonderful base to help our fellow educators to find that evidence, because I do worry that they tend to push it aside if they also need to find the evidence themselves. So yeah.
Well, I've been on my sabbaticals and had the time to gather it from all quarters as well. And actually, although I would from a feminist perspective want to embrace, you know, from an ethical perspective, want to embrace the body in my teaching, I now know from the scientists why it's great, neuroscientists or cognitive scientists, why it's great for the brain. I now know from psychologists how this movement can impact on psychology. You know, I think it's important to realize that this isn't just something pleasant and pleasurable, although that's great and that's one reason to do it, but it's great for the mind. What is great for the body is it's great for the mind, and they work hand in hand. They're not separate in any way.
And I think to come back to your Qigong, that also has many benefits, doesn't it? Because I know in your research you've been digging into this. What does it have to offer in the classroom, school and learning on other elements than just movement? Can you bring that into the space for a moment?
Well, yes, there's two major things about Qigong that entrance me really as a embodied being myself, but as an educator. And the first is its impact on mental health and well-being. And we, you know, this is a global issue. Mental health and well-being. For staff and students, there's just been a very interesting report on student and staff mental health across Europe by Lister, by the European Union, by Lister and her colleagues, which stress that mental health issues are one of the key agendas across Europe. And in the UK, you'll see this, like UCAS, or students apply to UCAS to enter into universities. They've recently published statistics saying that since 2014, student declarations of mental health have doubled in universities. You've got research from the student magazine, the Tab, with 4,000 participants, saying things like students feel stressed on a daily basis. Learning is stressful. It's an entry into the unknown.
Learning is disruptive.
It's disruptive, you know, and if they feel stressed on a daily basis. Anxiety is one of the most common mental health issues reported in universities. So we're very aware of it across the world. It's a huge issue for us. And there's lots of really wonderful initiatives, a raft of initiatives. We know that mental health and well-being is also crucial to student success. For me, very simply, bringing embodiment techniques into the classroom, making it part and parcel of the day-to-day activities of the students would really go some way in supporting these mental health and wellbeing initiatives in universities. Like my own teacher, I do Qigong with a lot of really wonderful teachers like Lee Holden, the US educator, and I asked him, Lee, do you have a message for educators about Qigong? And he said, if you move your body, you move your mind. And that comes out of the research, the impact of moving the body on the brain, for example. But in terms of mental health, I think that's really important to remember. And the World Health Organization actually advocates for Tai Chi and Qigong as a way of helping with mental health, for example.
I know a university in the Netherlands, they have a Tai Chi teacher every lunchtime who holds free sessions for all staff and students. And I've tried to reach him, he hasn't responded yet to be on the podcast. And so I think it's common knowledge by now that some form of movement, but this is interesting because I think it also has to do with specifically these more Eastern way of movements like Qigong and Tai Chi that you mentioned, where there's a slowing down. And
Slow the body, slow the mind,
yeah,
into the body. It can take us away from mental anxieties. Yeah, I think it's Brown University have Tai Chi sessions too. But a really important foundation I've engaged with for my own research is the John Brick Mental Health Foundation. They produce some really wonderful work, breathtaking analysis. They peer-reviewed papers produced on the effects of movement on mental health, I think for the last 10 years or something. And the research looked at something like 1,600 peer-reviewed papers, and they found a significant impact of Qigong on anxiety and movement in general on mental health. But obviously I was interested in the impact of and what they found about Qigong on for mental health and well-being, given that it's such an issue for educators.
Yeah.
So much so that this foundation recommends prescribing Qigong for anxiety in clinical settings. They would go that far, having read the scientific literature on the impact of Qigong on anxiety. So that made that connection for me. This seems to be a really appropriate thing to bring into universities if anxiety, mental health and well-being is such an issue for us. Which is.
And two other things that resonated with me from before when we spoke is moving together brings us closer together, I believe. What was the sentence?
That's really fascinating research on interpersonal synchrony, it's called. Yeah, moving together brings us together.
That one.
It's quite remarkable.
Yeah.
Another, I first of all encountered this through the US historian William McNeill, and he's a very famous historian, so much so that I think he had the keys to Congress Library. This is how important he was in American history. And he wrote this really marvelous book called Keeping Together in Time, about how important coordinated movement was for history. He actually set out to explore the proposition that moving together in time, that we've just done.
Yeah. And also before we started the interview, to just
coordinate that
the listeners or watchers don't see, but
exactly. So any synchronized movement he set out to explore changed the course of human history, nothing less. It seems so simple. And his book, so I really recommend his book. So he looks at how just, I don't know, sort of even line dancing. You think of any coordinated movement activity, it brings people together. And obviously there's the unsavory side of that, because
a sense of belonging is coming from that, which is so important as an antidote to the individualism.
That, you know, Nazi Germany used that to their benefit. So he set out to explore why, when I was a soldier, do we spend so long in drills marching at the same time? And that is because of that sense of belonging, bringing people together. Of course, it doesn't have to, so it fell out of favour, really, according to McNeill. But he said the power of just moving at the same time, you're blurring the self-other boundaries as one part of its power, you know. Oh, there's a similarity here. We're moving, our bodies are connecting here. The mirror neurons are firing. I'm saying that actually maybe we do connect. So moving together connects us. That comes
I remember I was I need to put this in because it was quite intense but interesting, an authentic relating course with Vix. I also met her, Vix Anderton, in the EFC course with Mark Walsh. We share Mark Walsh as well in the background, so you probably relate. And I was in this Utkatasana chair pose for yoga, chair pose, and I had a partner, and we were facing each other, and we didn't know how long it would take. There was, you know, sense of the exercise, and we were looking each other in the eye. We were a pair, and it was tough. You're in there for as long as you don't know how, and you want to stay up as long as you can together. And then that sense of belonging, we were communicating, because we're not allowed to speak, through our eye connection. Like, I started signaling. I remember now, like, this sense of belonging and connection, like, move together, brings us together. Like, I saw him shaking for a moment. I was like, I'm here with you. I'm here. I'm here now together. That's what I did. Here now together. And that was so strong that we made it together through. And I think I couldn't have done it if I were alone. Him, neither, was the conclusion. It was such a wonderful, tiny practice of where you could really relate and find that connection, the power of doing it together. And it just makes me look at the army from a totally different perspective, because I actually never thought about that in that way that you just pointed out.
But
Interesting.
there are much more positive ways of using synchronize and coordinate.
Yes.
Have a look at it. For example, Joanne Lumsden's research, this was done a long time ago, I think it was 2014. Really remarkable effects of moving together in a coordinated, rhythmic fashion. And one of them that Lumsden and her team came up with was how it has an impact on self-esteem. So that research was that it enhances mood. Doing a Kaylee dance with somebody else, it really enhances mood, but it makes you feel better about yourselves. Now, if we go back to my writing support and the students are like, oh my goodness, I'm not good enough. Just simple fact. I now, having read Joanne Lumsden's work, having read the work of interpersonal movement synchrony researchers, I actively bring coordinated movement into my session. You can see my work actually on 1HE. I've written about from me to you activity that uses coordinated movement, just because it has an impact on how people come together. And building a sense of belonging is another key agenda in higher education, again, globally. How to make students feel part of the community. Listen to William McNeill, listen to the researchers on interpersonal synchrony. It's a very simple way in which the body will help you to do that quite automatically without having a word. You are signaling positive connection with somebody else.
Our bodies are actually wired for it. We're wired for human connection. It's just with society and all the systems that we get disembodied. So I think embodiment is, you know, it's a means that serves a purpose of the disembodiment to create that connection again. So it's not the greater good embodiment, but it just brings us closer together, doesn't it? And it brings us more joy, more pleasure, a little bit more health. I think, Lisa, our list of show notes and literature is growing by the minute. So I'm starting to feel like we should bring it to a close, I believe, for all the listeners, because I'm already, you know, overexcited. Maybe they're already like halfway there with all that's been thrown at them. So I'd love to ask you, if people want to know more about embodied education, the work you do with all your knowledge that you bring out into the world, if they want to meet you, where are you? Where can people find you? What do you have to share?
They could start by Googling my name, by doing a search for my name, actually, but I'll spell my name because you'll never see this again, this name. It's Clughen, Clughen. It's a very unusual name. It's the only surname of its type in the UK.
And then let's add, it's Lisa with an S.
Lisa. But you can find me on the usual media channels like LinkedIn. In fact, that's how I met you, Liz. You contacted me through LinkedIn, didn't you? Yeah. I get a lot of messages from people on LinkedIn, and that's a lovely way of contacting me. I am on X and Facebook, but probably LinkedIn is probably the best way of contacting me, I would say. Yeah.
All right, cool. And what are you currently writing on that might come out soon? Is there any
I'm right. I've just submitted an article on joyful education, on the emotions for mental, physical health, which obviously are important in education, but for learning in itself. I'm really gone from the unsavory aspects of embodiment. You can see my journey really at the end where I'm at. I'm all about celebrating the body, embracing what it has to offer. The body can really feel passion and joy and pleasure and interest and curiosity. That's what I'm really encouraging. That's what I'm writing about. But I'm writing about it again, bringing the science I've read. Professor Andrew Steptoe, the world leader in longevity and aging. There seems to be real evidence that positive emotions are not just great for the brain, relax us, help us to learn, but also they're great for mental health. Obviously, if you feel good, it's an obviousness, but the scientists are saying things like if we feel positive, it lowers, they've got the scientific data, it lowers salivary cortisol, for example. So if we can bring positivity into our classes, have fun, then we're helping with mental health issues, well-being issues, we're helping students to learn, we're helping our students to perhaps live longer. The science is still out on that, but it seems to promote healthy age. So that's what I'm writing about at the minute: positive, joyful education through the body.
Through the body, everything through the body.
People can do, I'd love it if people would take part in my research on this, on how we can,
really,
we're trying to spread a bit of happiness across higher education for both educators themselves. Stuff are important in any context, and for students. So
can they reach out to you if they want to participate in this research?
Absolutely. lisa.clughen@ntu.ac.uk. But I'll be publishing it on LinkedIn. I'll keep publishing it for people to participate in. And there's lots of interesting aspects of that research. I'll be inviting people to do the 10 Days of Happiness programme by Action for Happiness, who's one of my partners in this research, for example. So we really want to explore how can we bring positive emotions, because we know they're great for learning, for mental health. How can we embed them as part of our day-to-day in higher education? So I'm hoping people are going to tell us what they've enjoyed, what's been positive for them, so we can look at techniques of bringing positivity in the classroom and other teaching activities.
Love it. Let's ripple some more positivity across education now.
Yeah, the body helps us, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Let's share that more. All right. I think that's it. If you are ready to say bye-bye, and then...
Oh, no, thank you. And thank you for your work, Liz. I think the body does deserve central stage in education, and you're helping us to do that. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your work.
Thank you so much for stepping up to this stage and sharing with us your embodied work, which is so profound, so interesting, and so exciting from the journey you've shared with us, and also so vulnerable. And I think it's a wonderful proof that also from the dark side comes a different part alive as well in your journey. So for everyone on their journey, wherever they are, I hope it reaches far with the information we shared. Thank you.
Thank you.